The day it happened, the sky was the kind of gray that makes everything feel like a warning. Not storm gray, not dramatic, just flat, like the sky had already decided it wasn't getting involved. Nadia had been standing outside the palace gate for 47 minutes. She knew because she'd checked her phone so many times the battery had dropped from 34% to 19%. She wasn't counting down to anything. She was counting to keep herself from doing something her mother would have called exactly the kind of reckless nonsense I raised you not to do. Her mother was gone now. That was the whole point of being here. The crowd had formed the way crowds always do at the royal palace of Aldenmere, slowly, then, all at once. Tourists with cameras. School children in matching yellow vests. A man selling miniature flags from a cart that squeaked every third rotation of its wheel. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Nadia had memorized the squeak. She was standing close enough to the east gate to smell the metal of it. Iron and rain and something older underneath, something that had been there long before the flags and the tourists and the squeaking cart. The two guards flanking the gate were exactly what you'd expect. Tall, still, red-coated, bearskin-hatted, faces set to that particular blankness that said I am not here as a person right now. She understood that. She'd been not here as a person for 11 months. The petition was folded in her coat pocket. She'd folded and refolded it so many times the creases had gone soft, like old skin. 42 pages. 14 witness statements. 3 legal opinions from lawyers who'd told her, each in their own carefully worded way, that she was wasting her time, that the ministry wouldn't see her, that the system that had swallowed her brother whole had very good teeth, and no interest in spitting him out. She'd said thank you and paid their consultation fees and gone home and kept going, because someone had to. The guard on the left was named Thomas. She'd found that out the week before, on her 4th visit to the gate, when a little girl had asked him his name, and he'd, against all regulation and training and professional blankness, told her, Thomas. She'd filed that away like a small coin she didn't know what to buy with yet. The guard on the right she didn't know. New rotation. Younger, maybe mid-20s, jaw clenched like he was daring the world to say something about it. She walked up to Thomas. I need to submit this directly, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I've sent it by post 4 times. I've emailed the ministry's general inquiry address twice. I've left 3 voicemails. Nobody has confirmed receipt. I need a physical acknowledgement stamp. I need someone to look at me and take this paper and say yes, we have it. Thomas didn't move. Ma'am, public petitions must be submitted through the designated. My brother has been in Hollowthorne prison for 11 months on a conviction that used falsified evidence. She didn't raise her voice. She'd learned that raised voices got you labeled and dismissed. He is 31 years old. He has a daughter. She's 4. She calls me on Sundays and asks when Daddy is coming home, and she stopped. Breathed. I need someone to take this paper. Thomas looked at her. Really looked, for just a fraction of a second, before the blankness came back down like a shutter. Ma'am, I'm not authorized to accept. Then, find me someone who is. Silence. The cart squeaked. The school children laughed at something behind her, bright and unaware. Nadia stood there and felt the 42 pages against her ribs, through her coat, through everything she'd held together for 11 months, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not despair. She knew despair. Despair was quiet and horizontal. This was different. This was vertical. She didn't plan what happened next. That matters. She needs you to know that. Later, the journalists would frame it as a stunt. A protest. A calculated act of political theater designed to go viral and pressure the palace into a response. One particularly terrible opinion piece would call her a woman who used grief as a weapon. She hadn't planned any of it. What happened was this. The younger guard stepped forward to redirect her. The standard move, the polite but firm physical suggestion that her time at the gate was over. And, as he moved, his hand swept toward her shoulder, and something in her simply said no. Not angry no. Not violent no. Just no. Her hand came up. She wasn't reaching for the guard. She was reaching to stop the contact, to hold the space she'd been standing in for 47 minutes, to say with her body what she'd already said with her voice, and her paperwork, and her 4 unanswered letters. I'm not done. Her fingers caught the hilt of his ceremonial sword. Not the blade. The hilt. For approximately 2 seconds, her hand was on a royal guard's sword. The crowd went absolutely silent. Even the cart stopped squeaking. She let go immediately. Her hand dropped. She stepped back. Her heart was doing something loud and architectural in her chest, like it was building something in there, fast, without a plan. The younger guard had frozen. His face had gone the color of old chalk. Thomas hadn't moved. But his eyes, the eyes that had done that one fraction of a second thing where he'd actually seen her, were doing something complicated now. The crowd had their phones up. Of course they did. This was the age of everything being witnessed, and nothing being helped. Nadia looked at the 42 pages in her hand. She dropped them when she grabbed the hilt. They were on the ground now, fanned out across the wet stone like something defeated, like everything she'd built and carried and refused to let be dismissed was just paper, lying on the ground. In the rain that had started, quietly, without announcement, the way things always started when you weren't watching. She bent down, and she started picking them up, one by one, slowly, on her knees on the wet stone in front of the royal palace while the crowd watched, and the guards stood frozen, and the cameras recorded, and the rain came down. Page by page, 42 of them. Nobody moved to help her. Nobody moved to stop her. She gathered every single page, straightened the stack against her knee, stood up, and looked at Thomas. "My brother's name is Ryan Khalil," she said. "He is innocent, and I will be back tomorrow." She turned and walked away through the crowd, which parted for her like it was suddenly embarrassed by itself. Behind her, she heard one of the school children, a small voice, a girl, ask her teacher, "Why was that lady so sad?" She didn't hear the answer. She didn't need to. By 9 o'clock that night, the video had 4 million views. Nadia knew this because her friend Priya had texted her 17 times in a row, each message just a number, climbing, 400K, 800K, 1.1 M, like a countdown running the wrong direction, like something building toward a destination Nadia couldn't see yet. She was sitting on the floor of her flat with her back against the radiator because the radiator was the warmest thing in the room, and she was very, very cold, the kind of cold that doesn't come from weather. Her phone kept lighting up. She kept not answering it. On the coffee table, one mug of tea, gone cold. The 42 pages, dried now but wrinkled, carrying the shape of the ring. A drawing Ryan's daughter Amara had sent her. A purple house with a very large sun and, for stick figures, one taller than the others, one noticeably absent, a gap in the family lineup that a 4-year-old had filled by drawing a star and writing, in enormous wobbly letters, "Daddy." Nadia stared at the star. Daddy. She thought about how Amara had learned to spell phonetically because no one had told her the rules yet. How that was the most honest way to spell anything. The way it sounds when you're saying it out loud, when you're saying it because you mean it, when there's no gap between the word and the wanting. Daddy. Her phone lit up again. This time the name on the screen was not Priya. It was a number she didn't recognize. London area code. She almost didn't answer. Her thumb hovered. The cold pressed in from everywhere the radiator couldn't reach. She picked up. "Ms. Khalil." The voice was careful, not unkind. The voice of someone who had been trained to deliver things, news, documents, decisions, without letting their own reaction contaminate the delivery. "Yes," she said. "My name is Commander Aldrich Voss. I am the head of ceremonial security at the Royal Palace of Aldenmere." A pause. "I believe you visited our East Gate today." Nadia closed her eyes. Here it is, she thought. The consequence. The charge. The reason 4 million views was always going to become something sharp. "I did," she said. "I'm calling," Commander Voss said, "because I watched the footage." She said nothing. The radiator ticked. All of it, he added, including the part the cameras didn't catch. She opened her eyes. "There are no cameras on the interior side of the East Gate archive corridor," he said. "Guard Whitmore, the younger officer, came to my office approximately 2 hours after the incident. He brought your petition with him. He'd collected the pages himself after you left. He wanted me to know that he'd failed in his duty." Her throat did something. "He said he should have taken it from you the first time you asked," Voss continued. "He said, and I'm reading from his own written report here, that he had never seen someone fight that hard for a person who wasn't even there to ask them to." She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. Not crying. She wasn't doing that. She'd made a rule about that 11 months ago, not in public, not on the phone, not in places where it could be used as evidence that she was too emotional to be taken seriously. The flat was private. The flat almost counted. She pressed harder. "Ms. Khalil, I've reviewed your petition. I'm not in a position to speak to the legal merits. That is not within my authority." Another pause, longer this time, the kind that meant what came next had been considered carefully. "But I am in a position to personally deliver it to the office of the Royal Council, with a cover letter from this office, which carries a different kind of weight than a public inquiry address." The radiator ticked. The cold. Amara's drawing on the table. The star. The gap where a father should be. Why? Nadia asked. It came out smaller than she intended. Raw at the edges. Because Guard Whitmore is 23 years old, Voss said. And what he wrote in that report is going to stay with me for a while. She didn't sleep that night. Not insomnia. Not anxiety spiraling. She just didn't want to. Felt like sleeping would mean releasing the grip on something she'd been holding since the phone call ended. Something fragile and not yet safe to put down. She sat on the floor and read the petition again. All 42 pages. She'd read it so many times she could have recited sections from memory. But she read it again anyway because it was the only thing she knew how to do. And it was the thing she'd been doing. And you don't stop doing the thing just because someone called and said maybe it's working. Hope was the most dangerous thing she'd ever handled. She'd been careful with it. Kept it small. Useful sized. Just enough to get her out of bed each morning. Just enough to make the next call, write the next letter, fold, and refold the papers until the creases went soft as old skin. Too much hope. And you became someone who could be destroyed by a single phone call going the wrong way. She knew about that kind of destruction. She'd watched it happen to her mother. Year after year of believing the system would course correct itself, that decency was structural rather than occasional, that someone in a position of power would simply do the right thing without being dragged to it. Her mother had believed that all the way to the end. Nadia had learned something different. You don't wait for people to do the right thing. You make it more inconvenient for them not to. You stand at a gate for 47 minutes in November rain. You drop your papers. You pick them up. You say his name out loud, Ryan Khalil, in front of cameras and guards and school children, because names are the smallest unit of resistance, and they are enough. They are enough. She fell asleep at 4 a.m. on the floor, her back against the radiator, the petition pressed against her chest like something she'd earned. The next morning, she had a voicemail from a number she didn't recognize. She almost deleted it. Spam, probably. The world is mostly spam now. She didn't delete it. The voice on the message was scratchy, older, a woman's voice, and it said, I saw the video. My son is in Hollowthorne too. I've been trying to get someone to listen for 3 years. I don't know if you have a lawyer, but I have documents. Real ones. If you want to compare notes, call me back. My name is Margaret. I've been waiting a long time to meet someone as stubborn as I apparently am. A pause. Good job not letting go of that sword, by the way. The voicemail ended. Nadia sat with the phone in her hand, and the morning light coming through the blinds in thin, specific lines, catching the dust in the air, turning it briefly gold. She called Margaret back. It rang twice. I was starting to think you wouldn't call, Margaret said, by way of hello. I almost didn't, Nadia said. But you did. But I did. A beat of silence that felt less like a pause, and more like an agreement between two people who understood something about persistence that most people are lucky enough never to need to understand. Tell me about your son, Nadia said. And Margaret did. 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday, in a room that smelled like old carpet and institutional coffee, a junior barrister named Priya. Yes, the same Priya who had texted the climbing view counts like a malfunctioning scoreboard, spread 67 pages across a conference table, and said, in the voice she used when she wanted something to sound inevitable, the conviction is going to collapse. Nadia looked at the pages. 67 now. The 42 had become 67 because Margaret had 3 years of documents, and Margaret was, as advertised, extremely stubborn and had been waiting for someone to aim her at the right wall. When, Nadia said. Not are you sure? Not really. When? Priya smiled. A small, careful, don't jinx it smile. The appeal hearing is in 31 days. 31 days. Nadia did the math she'd been doing for 11 months. 365 days minus 30 equals how many mornings a little girl woke up in a house with a star on a drawing instead of a father in the kitchen. She stopped doing the math. The night before the appeal hearing, she called Ryan. The prison allowed one 20-minute call per week. She had been using her weekly call for 11 months. Every Sunday, 7 p.m., on the dot. Sometimes they talked about important things, the case, the evidence, the legal strategy. More often they talked about nothing at all. The weather outside. A television program. Whether the corner shop near his old flat still sold the specific brand of orange biscuits he'd eaten every day for 4 years. She didn't know if the shop still had them. She'd never checked. She'd always meant to check. I can't sleep, he said. His voice over prison phone lines had a specific texture she'd gotten used to. Thin, slightly hollow, carrying the echo of everything around it that she couldn't see. Me neither, she said. Nadia. A pause. If it doesn't go, it's going to go. But if, Ryan. She said his name the way their mother used to. Full stop. I have heard the rest of the sentence, and I am choosing not to accept its premise. I picked 42 pages off Whetstone in November. I am not doing that for a nothing. He laughed. It was a short laugh, surprised out of him, and it sounded real. The hollow quality went out of it for a second, and he sounded like himself, like the version of him that used to leave her voicemails doing terrible impressions of people they both knew, like the version of him that was 31 and had a daughter who spelled things the way they sounded. She drew me another picture, he said. I know. She sent me one too. What was in yours? Purple house. Sunday. You, me, her, and a cat. We don't have a cat. She wants a cat. She's getting a cat, Nadia said. The moment you're out, she's getting a cat. I'll buy it myself. Another pause. Longer. Carrying the kind of weight that 20-minute weekly calls accumulate over 11 months. Thank you, he said. Just that. She knew what it meant. It meant everything from the 42 pages to the phone call from Commander Voss, to the 67 pages, to the 31 days, to all the Sundays. Every Sunday, 7 p.m., never once skipping, never once letting the hollow phone line go unanswered. Don't thank me yet, she said. Thank me when Amara has her cat. The hearing lasted 4 hours and 12 minutes. Nadia sat in the gallery with Margaret, who had worn a green coat and sensible shoes, and held a handkerchief in her hand the entire time with the particular grip of someone who had been waiting 3 years to need it. She didn't need it for crying. She needed it because her hands did something, when she was nervous, that she couldn't entirely control, a small rolling motion, the handkerchief turning over and over in her fingers. She'd told Nadia this in their first phone call, apologetically, as if a nervous tic was something that required disclosure. Nadia had said she collected pens for the same reason. They'd understood each other immediately after that. The barrister on the other side was good. Technically good, precise, unflappable, the kind of good that's been refined by years of working for the side that assumes it will win. He presented the original case with the certainty of something load-bearing, something that had been holding up a structure too large and too old for anyone to want to examine the foundations. Priya took the foundations apart. She did it without drama, without theatrical pauses or pointed glances at the gallery. She just laid each piece of evidence on the table, the falsified timestamp on the key witness statement, the chain of custody documentation with the gap in it, the communications that had been summarized in the original trial record in a way that, when the originals were finally obtained through a Freedom of Information request Margaret had filed 2 years ago, and been denied, and refiled, and been denied again, and then filed a third time with a different reference number, the communications that told a completely different story, document by document. The way you pick 42 pages up off Whetstone, one at a time, until you have all of them. They didn't release him that day. That's not how it works. That's not how any of it works. Slowly, paperwork, processing, the system that has very good teeth not releasing things it swallowed without a significant amount of additional grinding. What happened that day was, the conviction was quashed. The judge said the words that meant this should not have happened in the precise, airless language of legal determinations that never say what they mean directly, because directly would mean accountability, and accountability is a door the system prefers to keep locked from the inside. Nadia heard the words. The handkerchief in Margaret's hands went still. In the gallery, Priya turned around and looked at Nadia with an expression that contained everything she'd been too careful to say for 6 weeks. Every I think this is going to work she'd swallowed down into we have a strong case. Every he might actually come home she'd filed under the evidence is compelling. Nadia looked back at her. And then she looked at her hands. The same hands that had reached for a hilt on a wet November morning not as a protest or a stunt or a weapon, but because a body in distress will reach for something solid when the ground keeps refusing to hold. The same hands that had picked up 42 pages one by one. Ryan came home on a Friday. Amara was there. Of course she was there. She'd been told Daddy is coming home on Friday on Monday, and had asked every single morning since then, is today Friday, and had been told no, tomorrow, 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 until finally, it was no longer tomorrow. She ran at him from the end of the hall. He caught her. He held on. Nadia stood back and watched her brother hold his daughter in a hallway that smelled like someone had recently mopped it with something lemony and institutional, and she felt something she didn't have a word for. Not joy exactly. Joy was too clean for what had preceded it. This was joy with scar tissue. Joy that knew what it cost. Joy that had 42 pages of documentation behind it, and 11 months of Sunday phone calls, and a woman named Margaret with a handkerchief, and A 23-year-old guard who had picked up her papers off the wet stone after she left and carried them all the way to his commanding officer because something in him had decided that was the thing to do. He had never seen someone fight that hard for a person who wasn't even there to ask them to. Amara was still holding on, arms locked around her father's neck with the absolute structural confidence of a child who has learned that the people she loves leave sometimes, but has not yet learned that this might be permanent. Over his daughter's shoulder, Ryan looked at Nadia. She looked back. He mouthed something. No sound. She knew what it was. She shook her head. Don't. Because if he said it out loud, she was going to break 11 months of discipline in a hallway that smelled like lemons, and she was not doing that. He said it anyway. Out loud. Quietly. Across the hallway with his daughter in his arms, and the Friday light coming in through the door. Thank you. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. She held it there. The lemons. The light. His daughter's voice. Daddy, you smell different. His laugh. Real, full, without the hollow echo of phone lines. I know, Habibti. I know. Nadia breathed in. Breathed out. Let go of 11 months, one exhale at a time. Later, she would buy the cat. A small, orange, unreasonably loud cat that Amara named Star, because of the drawing, because of the gap it had been filling, because 4-year-olds understand memorials better than anyone gives them credit for. Star the cat knocked over 2 mugs, shredded one corner of the sofa, and sat on Ryan's chest every night for a year like a small warm anchor keeping him earthbound. Nadia thought that was the right amount of chaos for a story that had started with 42 pages on wet stone. She thought her mother would have agreed. She thought a lot of things, in the months that followed, that she kept to herself, small, private recognitions about what it means to carry something when no one has asked you to, and what it costs, and what it occasionally, improbably, against all legal and institutional and structural odds, manages to become. She thought about Guard Whitmore, 23 years old, picking up her papers in the rain. She sent him a letter. Brief. No explanation, no footnote, no drawn-out statement of gratitude. Just, his name is Ryan Khalil. He came home on a Friday. NK. She didn't know if it reached him. She didn't need to know. Some things you put down because they've done what they were for. You fold the crease in the paper one last time. And you let it go.